Imagine confessing to a murder you never committed. At best, you could find yourself incarcerated. At worst, it could lead to your execution. And yet, this happens more often than most of us would believe. In this video, we will explore the psychology of false confessions, how fear, exhaustion, and manipulation can twist an innocent person's mind until they admit to crimes they never committed, along with case examples where this terrifying paradox destroyed lives. For centuries, the confession was called the Queen of Proofs, from the Latin phrase confessio est regina probationem. Essentially, if you admitted your guilt, no further evidence was needed. In medieval and early modern justice, confession was the crown jewel of a trial. But how these confessions were obtained goes far beyond any resemblance of modern ethics. Through torture, humiliation, and fear, inquisitors of the past had a wide range of tools and methods to get what they wanted. The rack, the thumbscrew, the branding iron were just some of the devices designed to force words from a prisoner's lips. And yet, even after torture was outlawed, the belief in confession as the truest evidence remained. Judges, juries, even the public trusted the spoken word above all else. But the truth is fragile. A confession can be coaxed, corrupted, or conjured under the weight of desperation. And sometimes, people confess not because they are guilty, but because they cannot endure the alternative. Modern research shows there is more than one pathway to a false confession. Psychologists commonly group these into three types: voluntary, compliant, and internalized. Voluntary confessions come unprompted, sometimes to gain attention, to protect someone else, or due to mental illness, such as in 2006 when John Mark Carr confessed to the murder of 6-year-old Jean-Benet Ramsey. He seemed to be driven by a desire to be recognized, no matter the notoriety. But his statement was proven false almost immediately. His version of events did not align with the crime, and crucially, his DNA did not match that found at the scene. He was released without charge. Compliant confessions happen when pressure, threats, or promises make a suspect say anything to end the ordeal. In 1984, Eddie Joe Lloyd, a man with a history of mental health issues, told police he was a psychic who could help solve the sexual assault and murder of teenager Michelle Jackson. But he was treated as a suspect, given private details about the crime which he fed back to investigators, and was convinced his confession could help solve the crime, unaware he was writing his own sentence. Convicted and sentenced to life imprisonment, it wasn't until 2002 that DNA evidence would prove his innocence, and he was exonerated after 17 years in prison. Internalized confessions are the most troubling. These come through suggestion, fatigue, and memory contamination, leading people to come to the belief they did something which they did not do. This was the case for 18-year-old Peter Reilly, who in 1973 was arrested for the murder of his mother in Connecticut. Interrogated for over 20 hours with no legal counsel, police falsely told him he had failed a polygraph, that he was confused and repressing his memories. Exhausted, distressed, and full of doubt, Reilly signed a detailed confession, a mix of his account and details given by police. This was the primary evidence used against him and led to a maximum 16-year sentence. But in 1976, after a lengthy appeals process and the rallied support of his local community, new evidence came to light exonerating him of the crime. The serial killer Henry Lee Lucas, also known as the Confession Killer, is a fascinating and complex example of a mix of these. a case that requires its own attention, and one we will be covering in depth in another video. A turning point came with DNA exonerations. In a landmark analysis of 125 proven false confession cases, legal scholars Stephen Drizin and Richard Leo showed how interrogation conditions correlate with miscarriages of justice. They found over 80% of false confessors were questioned for more than 6 hours, with an average duration of 16.3 hours, far beyond ordinary interviews, which typically lasted under 2. This showed that duration doesn't maximize the details, only the risks. Research by Dr. Melissa Russano and colleagues, as well as broader reviews by Professor Saul Kassin, produced fascinating statistics. Interrogations that maximize a threat, such as "the evidence proves you did this, denials are useless," or minimize the moral blame, which sounds like "you just snapped, tell us and we'll help," reliably shift people toward confession. Laboratory paradigms show that minimization and implied leniency increase both true and false confessions, and reduce diagnosticity, the ratio of true to false admissions. In other words, you may get more confessions, but they're less reliable. Sleep deprivation and exhaustion can also have significant impacts on results. In a controlled study published in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences, participants kept awake all night were roughly 4.5 times more likely to sign a false admission after a single prompt than rested participants. Not everyone is equally resilient under pressure. Forensic psychologist Gísli Gudjonsson developed the Gudjonsson Suggestibility Scale, the GSS, to measure how strongly people yield to leading questions and change their answers under pressure. Higher suggestibility scores are consistently linked to greater false confession risk, especially among youths, people with intellectual disabilities, and those with certain mental health vulnerabilities. Interrogation method also matters. The Reid technique, developed in the US, assumes guilt and relies on confrontation, pressure, and deception, from presenting false evidence to downplaying the seriousness of the crime. By contrast, the UK's PEACE model, preparation, engage, account, closure, evaluation, works to build a rapport with the accused. It uses open-ended questioning and seeks reliable information. Studies suggest this reduces false confession risk while still producing usable evidence. The science didn't stop at diagnosis. It led to reform proposals. The American Psychology Law Society White Paper recommended safeguards to reduce risk, such as recording interviews, avoiding deceptive evidence ploys with juveniles, limiting duration, and curbing maximization-minimization tactics. The lesson is clear. Pressure plus fatigue plus suggestion equals risk. And in real cases, that equation has ruined lives. False confessions are not just tragic accidents. They destroy innocent people. They allow real criminals to walk free, and they reveal the terrifying power imbalance between the individual and the state. To confess is to surrender, to give your voice to the state, the law, and to history. But sometimes, confession is not truth. It's survival. And when that survival becomes a lie, justice itself is led astray. Thank you for watching. And if you want to hear more deep dives into the dark corners of crime, psychology, and history, follow Footprints in Blood.